Um, Good evening, everyone. We're so glad to be able to come together one day after all the holidays are over and Shabbat is over for something that is really special. In 2008 was the first time that our very own Dr. Gordon Goldberg and Dr. Chris Borg came together for what is a biennial event about looking at the polls and what they say, forecasting into the future, what elections may be. And every year, or every 2 years, I should say, it is really a thrill and wonderful to be able to come together. We miss Gordon a lot. He truly was. He grew up here in Bethlehem, played basketball, through and through. The Lehigh Valley was his and Rosalie's home. That's my adopted home. And from Kutztown University, where Gordon taught for so many years, all of the blessing that we've been able to have. Because while we like to say that the Torah isn't partisan, it is indeed political. We learn a lot of things from the Torah, like feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and so on. That is a political thing, and we might disagree about how we get there. But so many things that are important to so much of us happen in elections. They do matter. Elections matter. And Gordon knew it. I think we understand it. And hopefully Chris, as always, has provided us amazing insight about what is actually happening. First of all, what do we know and what do we not know? Right? There's a lot of the unknown. I feel certainly this year, but maybe I'm wrong. And so it is an honor and privilege to welcome everyone here this evening. And it's great to partner with this guy and the Jewish Federation of the Lehigh Valley in making this happen and possible. And now I'm going to turn it over to Aaron, who's wearing a Dodger thing in a Yankee shul. I don't know.
Rosalie, because she was probably a Brooklyn Dodger fan, and so take that, Rabbi. And 2-0. Just wanted to welcome everybody.
Wait till you go to the Bronx.
And I don't know gonna talk baseball, but last time I went to see the Dodgers play the Yankees, which was this year, the score was 10-2 to the Dodgers. So just saying. I wanted to first say thank you to our friends from KI who are here tonight for consolidating this program. The Gordon Goldberg Memorial Lecture was named 2 years ago after the very sad passing of Dr. Gordon Goldberg. And for us, it's been a staple in our community every 2 years, while the candidates have changed and also our area has changed from being PA5 to PA7 to whatever. The one thing that has never changed is that we have this lecture and that we continue to honor Gordon's memory by hosting this lecture. The lecture began when Gordon became aware of Chris Borg's Muhlenberg College morning call polling during Barack Obama and John McCain's presidential race. Then they team up here at Bridge Alum to start the lecture, at that time not the memorial lecture, but certainly a presentation to inform Lehigh Valley voters, not of what the candidates think or don't think about, but specifically to talk about the polling. And we should really feel fortunate to have one of the most prestigious polling happening at Muhlenberg College. That's not something to take lightly. It's an honor that we're able to do that, and that we have one of the best polling individuals in the nation talking to us tonight, especially such a special night. Gordon was a professor, as the Rabbi mentioned, at Kutztown University, where he chaired the history department and the faculty senate. He was the first director of the school's honors program. Each election, Gordon and Chris picked a topic that was relevant regarding the polling. I don't know what's going to be today. Nothing exciting has happened in the last 100 years, so the last 100 days. So we're just thrilled and happy to have Chris here. And I will just end up by saying, and I'm sure Chris will talk more about that while it's not an accurate polling, the Gordon polling that will happen tonight is something that's a tradition here. So I will pass the microphone to Chris, and who will talk about the Gordon polling and about polling in general today. So thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you so much, Aaron, and to the Federation for the invitation. Rabbi, to be back at Congregation Brit Shalom once again, and the KI folks in the audience. Thank you so much for coming over. I promise I'm going to come. I talked with Charlie Richter, my old colleague, who said he's going to organize. I'll do a post-election talk there. There'll be plenty of good things to talk about, and all the Brit Shalom folks can come over to to KI that day. That's the thing. So thank you for everybody for being generous, and most certainly thank you once again to honor Gordon and my friend, fellow professor who brought me here years ago, and for some reason kept bringing me back time and time again. Gordon was, as many of you know, in my mind, professors always had this stature. I still, some of my professors from an undergrad, even though I'm well up there in age, I still call professor, right? I see them, I meet them at conferences, and they say, well, you can call me whatever my name is. I say, I can't, you're a professor. Well, Gordon was like that. Although he was delightful and such a warm person, he seemed like a professor to me, that history professor. And it was always a delight to talk with him. As you might guess, two professors, when he'd call to ask me to come back for another event, those calls wouldn't be quick. They would last a little while because we'd have so much to talk to, you know, historians, political scientists. And it was always a pleasure. So even tonight, my wife was saying, oh, you're giving a talk. She goes, oh, you go back to Brit Shalom quite a bit. I go, yeah, it was always delightful. And it was talking about Gordon. And I said, well, I've been giving lots of talks. This is lots of talks this fall. I've been wearing a lot of blue blazers and stuff, but I picked out a little more professory blazer today, a little tweedy, you know, look for it. And that's a nod to my good friend Gordon, who we honor tonight. So I'm going to it'll be a little different. So usually when I come, we bring the screen down, I throw up a lot of numbers up there to look at. But this fall, I said, you know, this is a good time to talk a little bit more, maybe think a little bit more about the race in ways that aren't always connected. I'm going to still talk about numbers. I'm going to still talk about polling. I'm going to talk about those various aspects of the race that I always talk about, but we'll put it into a little bit more of a narrative form tonight, because it is a little bit of an exceptional time that we're in, not only nationally, but here in the Lehigh Valley. And that's important. Every talk I've given this fall, every single talk, and been dozens of them now, I start by saying how exceptional our role is as voters here and now in this race. I've been studying politics for a long time. I've been polling for 3 decades. And this year is, by any standard that I've looked at, a truly exceptional time to be a voter, and to be a voter here in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. You all know it. You are living it. You are living it right now. To being in not only the national spotlight, but the international spotlight. You know, I run a polling institute here in Pennsylvania and have for a long time. Why would I get daily requests from reporters from Japan, from France, from Italy, the BBC, the major German outlets, outlets from China, outlets from Brazil, outlets from Australia, to ask about what's going on here. It's not me. They're interested in you. They're interested in what's going on in this place, because Pennsylvania, and within Pennsylvania, the Lehigh Valley, is really the center of American politics. And that's an incredible privilege, right? It's an incredible privilege. I've reminded people this year that in the United States, many Americans are going to go to the polls, or have gone to polls through mail ballots this year, and know exactly what's going to happen in those races. Exactly. They'll go. There's no competition. Some of those races don't even have 2 people competing. or if there are people competing, the outcome is given because the district is overwhelmingly Republican or Democrat. The state is overwhelmingly Democrat or Republican. So there's no surprise. There's no excitement. There's no real choice. And choice is something that everyone should value. Everyone should value. I see that the helpers. I was down at the PA Chamber of Commerce and giving a talk, and their son works for the chamber, doing a wonderful job, by the way. You should be proud parents. And I told them, I said, look, you of all people, you're business folks, right? You are business folks at the chamber. You know how important choice is. That's what drives markets. That's what drives everything. And when there's no choice, things don't seem to go too well. Monopolies, all kinds of things happen. Not really good. And that happens a lot in American democracy. Not always for reasons that are negatives. We sort ourselves. We live in places amongst others that have similar political views, and that sometimes gets rid of choice. But often we find ways to manufacture it by the way we draw our lines or how we create our districts. So we sometimes take choice out. Well, for you right now here in the Lehigh Valley, your choices are exceptional, and they're impactful, and they're important. And that goes not only from the presidential race, which of course we're spending lots of time thinking about in our lives because it is so important, but all the way down, as I'll talk about tonight, to our state legislature, to our local representatives that go to Harrisburg for us, that we are graced with those types of choices that are available. And so I want to remind you of those choices, and I want to talk about, from a political science perspective, how those things shape up and how they might play out as we go along. So I always did this when I've talked over here. I talk about the importance. Political scientists often think about cycles, right? And how cycles work. And I've come back here time and time again. We might be in a midterm election or certain presidential elections, and I say, well, you should always be aware of cycles. Cycles, like in many things, like weather, the stock market, economies, often really affect the likelihood of certain things happening and certain outcomes coming. And I was talking in my class the other day, my elections class at Muhlenberg, and they're trying I do every year, this kind of a fun exercise. I always have them predict the election. I have them predict the election. And in that prediction, they have to think about, well, what's likely to happen? And I go, well, how do you predict elections? Well, you have to think about history. You have to think about polls. You have to think about how things happen over time in cycles. And so I was reminding them. So think about this. If you didn't know anything about this year, and I told you, well, there's no incumbent in the race. There's no incumbent. And you might say, oh, okay, well, is that complicated? Well, sure. Because the current president has stepped down in the middle of the race. His vice president's on the ticket. That's fairly unusual. Hasn't really happened since 1968 when LBJ did. Or you said, well, there's a former president that's running again. That doesn't happen very often, really, not much in the 19th century. So there are some unique facets, but still there is no incumbent. There is no one president, current president running. And that's happened quite a bit in America. We can go back not too long. Let's go back 60 some years into the 1960s. And it does happen fairly regularly. It happened in 1960. No incumbent that year. That's the Kennedy-Nixon election. Pretty big historical election. It happened in 1968 when LBJ stepped down. That's the Humphrey-Nixon election that happened. It happened in 1976. This was Jimmy Carter. And Ford, and you said, well, Ford kind of, like, we can make a case, right, is the incumbent because he was the president at the time, but Nixon, who had won, didn't. So it was complicated, but we could say that was one. You can go up to 1988. This was George H.W. Bush, right, versus Michael Dukakis. We go further in time, 2000. That's Gore versus Bush, second Bush, W. Bush, as the president. You go up to 2008. That was the Obama-McCain election, and Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. in 2016. So you can look at those different years, right, and see the campaigns. And you go back and you look at them and you say, is there any trend available in those elections? Is there any outcome that usually happens? Well, the outcome is the president's party usually loses. The president's party usually loses in those years. The only exception, the only time when there hasn't been an incumbent on the ballot since 60 was George H.W. Bush in 2008, or excuse me, it's 1988. When he beat Dukakis, this was after 2 terms of Ronald Reagan. He was running on his own accord against Dukakis. He won that year. That's the only time it's happened. All the other times, the party that was in power, whoever the president's party was, lost. Nixon in 1960, Kennedy wins. That was Eisenhower as the president. LBJ in 1968. We'll go up to, we'll kind of skip forward for the unique circumstances. 1988, that was the case. But 2000, Clinton was president. 2008, George W. Bush was president. 2016, Obama was president. Every time that's happened. And you might say, well, is that just a coincidence? Not a gigantic sample size, but it really does say something about the American DNA. We're usually reaching for something different. We're usually reaching when presented an opportunity for something different. It doesn't dictate the outcome, but it sets the conditions, right? It sets the conditions. So that's one big thing, cyclically. And you would say, well, what does that lead? Of course, right now, President Biden's the president. That's if it follows those broad patterns that we see, that's a wind at the back of Trump and Republicans right now. The other big factor, before I get into the races, I'm sorry.
Terms, like you said, Reagan was 2 terms.
Yes.
Obama was 2 terms. How much would that actually?
It's a beautiful question. If everybody heard it, what happens if it's, historically, a lot of them have been 2 terms. And that generally we say is even harder, right, to defend, because you're kind of wear and tear of 2 terms. People are really seeking for change, as you would in 1960, maybe coming out of the Eisenhower years, moving to a new era with Kennedy, right? Or after the George W. Bush years with Obama, looking for a change of direction. The country wasn't all that happy. You see in other times, most recently, right? We had the example of 2020. 2016, right? We could say, well, that lended itself to Republican and ultimately became Republican with Trump after 2 terms, but fairly close, right? And the 2016 and 2000 races are fascinating, right? Because they weren't majority in the popular vote, the winners, right? So they're complicated, and so a lot of these things are complicated, and we can talk a little bit more about that. The other big factor, and this kind of goes back to the fatigue factor that we see. What's the mood of the country? I'm a pollster. We go back and we look at where is the public? Where is the public at any given time? Are they positive? Is there a good feeling? So you might say in like the 80s when George H.W. Bush won. This was during the Reagan years, right? Reagan and his Morning in America model was pretty popular. As he left office, fairly popular. His numbers have gone down a little bit, but pretty popular, and there was a generally positive sense. Other times, as I mentioned, George W. Bush in 2008, his numbers had sunk dramatically, right, during the history of the Iraq War, and had gone down significantly. When presidents' numbers, when people are feeling pretty bad about the direction of the country, it gets harder to maintain. The examples that we could look at in those cases are elections like 2008, when Bush wasn't very popular. The mood was pretty sour, and Obama can capitalize on that. 1968, LBJ's numbers were down in the pits. Nixon can capitalize on that. There's a mood, there's a sadness kind of in the country at the time. And that usually helps the out party. So if the president's numbers are bad, and you could ask right now, where are President Biden's numbers? Well, President Biden's numbers are around 40% approval rating. right now, 50 to 53%. I didn't check today. Disapproval, which if you look historically and you kind of match it up, if I had my graph here, I could show you right now, not usually a good place for the president's party. So all I'm doing is right now is setting the stage, right? I'm setting the overall environment in which the details of this race take place. And I would say those are atmospheric aspects that put pressure on the party of the president. And that's, of course, Vice President Harris's party right now, the Democrats. And so that doesn't dictate anything, but it's some context. So what about the races themselves? What about the races? Where are we with the races? And as you might guess, from looking out your doors or looking at TV, it's a very extremely close race by every metric I can tell you. In terms of this race right now, both in Pennsylvania and across the country and national. I've been polling. I'm, got a lot of gray hair. I've been doing this for a long time. I've never seen closer conditions in a race in all the years that I've been polling and looking at it. You just look in terms of the presidential race, and you could say, well, what are the indicators that make that the case? What are things that you see? Well, the polling, first of all, right? If anybody follows polling averages, and on 538 or Real Clear Politics, just go through them, and you'll see swing states, right? 1 point difference, even 1 point difference back and forth between the candidates. If you have a lot of friends that follow this every day looking for changes. There hasn't been all that. There's marginal changes and everybody makes a big deal of them. But the general rule is the closeness, the tightness of these races that we're seeing. The polling, our last poll in the state, we're polling right now, by the way, in Pennsylvania, we'll be releasing next weekend. Our last poll had it dead even in the race. Poll that same day, this is a story, by the way, we used to be one of the few polls in the state. Franklin and Marshall, Quinnipiac would come in, there'd be a couple polls. We'd put out a poll and no one else would for a week. The day we put out our last poll, 4 other polls came out on the same day that either showed it tied or very close. You just look at it there. That's the nature of this race. It is very close. And you don't believe the polls, believe the candidates. Look at the candidates. Look at Trump, former President Trump, look at Vice President Harris. Where are they spending most of their time? Here, former President Trump's coming to the PPL Center Tuesday. Would I be shocked if the Vice President, makes a trip in the next week? No, or close by. I show in my class. We have a map, a couple good sites about where people where the candidates travel, and you can see occasional, random states like former President Trump's in New York right now. Doing a rally, and Vice President Harris was down in Texas a few days ago doing a rally, right? Those happen, but look where they're concentrated. You say, well, the swing states, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, but one stands out over and over again. It's like a little blob on the map because there's so many trips, right? Unless you like pan out, it looks just like one big dark color over Pennsylvania. It's because they're here. So if it's not Vice President Harris, former President Trump, it's Governor Walz or Senator Vance that are here, right? They're back over and over again because they know how close it is. You are the product of all the ads. You're seeing the ads, right? No matter where you go. This is the thing that's unbelievable right now. It's really hard to escape. You watch a show on TV, it's going to be there. You turn on the radio, it's going to be there. You go to get your mail, it's going to be there. It's going to be sitting right there in the pile that you get. You go to the computer, you click on your favorite site, you check out a YouTube video. Boom. I was painting my porch this year over in Nazareth this fall, and I just stick on like YouTube or something with music. And lo and behold, every break, it's another commercial for the race, right? They are ubiquitous. The amount of spending, no state is near Pennsylvania right now, not even near the amount that's being spent here on the ads, because the candidates know that. They're doing it with their time. They're doing it with their money. They're trying to find any avenue. You ride down. I go from Nazareth to Allentown to work.
Route 22. Sign after sign, right? It's like you can't even pick your. I should be looking at the road, not the signs. But occasionally you see those signs, and of course, right? There are signs for the candidates right now. So it is everywhere. They're doing everything. They're trying to find, and this is the nature of this race. That I've talked to folks. The nature of the race is they're looking for every marginal edge that they can get. So they're putting ads in places that you might not think is a good place. I've been using the example here. I do some interviews with one of our local, more conservative stations. And the news director there has told me, oh, you wouldn't believe how much money Harris is putting into our station right now. This is a conservative local radio station. You probably know it. But the news director said, oh, they're paying a ton. Like, really? Why would you pay a whole load of money to run ads on a conservative station if you're Vice President Harris? Because you're looking at the margin, right? You're looking at that 95%, maybe moving a couple dissatisfied Republicans, right? That tune into the station. Same thing with former President Trump running lots and lots of ads on Black radio and Latino radio in Philadelphia and other places, including in the Lehigh Valley. And you think, well, those aren't usually, especially Black radio, a place where Trump might be centered. He's looking for the margins. And that's the nature of this race. This is a margins race. It is a margins race, and they're looking for those. The polls are close. By the way, the history's close. You know the history, right? President Biden won here by about 1.2%, 80,000 votes. Trump won here 4 years earlier by 44,000 votes, about 0.5%. So the record is there, the evidence is there, and they'll do anything. And we're the big dog. We're 19 electoral votes. To get to 270, it's a hell of a lot easier with Pennsylvania. And that's the nature of the race. And so it's been that way, largely since summer. When President Biden stepped aside in July, he was, our polls, other polls were showing him slipping significantly, not gigantically. Even, by the way, I just want to make that a point. It was like a 3-point maybe gap in Pennsylvania and other places. That's historically not a big gap to have, but his trend lines had been going in the wrong direction. When Vice President Harris became the nominee, or even before she became the nominee, the race tightened, and it's vacillated a little bit since then, but not dramatically. Of course, every one of those little blips is important because of how close it is, and we follow it deeply, and people will make big kind of conclusions, but the reality is it's close. You talk to people in the campaigns, they know it's close. They'll give you a little more optimistic spin on their side, but the folks I know, the pollsters and that, will tell you it's close. So it's an unbelievable amount of energy focused on you, the voters in the state, in terms of the presidential race. That will happen right up to the end. Expect it. Again, there's a reason why the former president's here this week, and you'll see lots more activity this week. But the top billing, the world's looking at that race. As you know, you have lots of other competitive races to engage in this year, which is, again, a bit of a blessing. Maybe we'll talk at the end, a little bit of a curse, but also a blessing in terms of our things. The Senate race that you've been following is a very expensive, competitive race right now. Senator Casey, who everybody knows, iconic name in Pennsylvania politics, is looking for a 4th term. Senator Casey, if you know, has won overwhelmingly in his past 3 races, over double-digit wins in a competitive state. Pennsylvania, as you know, is not, we could think of it generally competitive. This last decade's had some interesting patterns with Dems doing well. But largely, this is a competitive state, and he's won on average by double-digit numbers. That's not easy to do. And that's a testament to him. It comes from an iconic name. His dad was governor. He's fit Pennsylvania politics pretty well over time, taking kind of a more moderate position historically. He's moved a little bit left with his party. That's opened him up, but largely he's been a tough out. He's also run against candidates that I would argue weren't the best statewide candidates in a race. Individuals that when you look at them, you might say, probably not your primetime contenders that you draw up. Even back to his first race. I don't know if you remember his first race, 2006, for Senate. It was Rick Santorum, who was a U.S. Senator at the time. He beat Santorum by like 16 points that year. Incumbents don't lose in that numbers, and that's part of who he is. But this year, he's being challenged in a different way. Dave McCormick, the Republican nominee, has emerged as by far Casey's toughest competition. Polls, including ours, have shown this race to be very tight. Casey's lead is down into low single digits. If you look at the averages, well, again, we're polling it this week, which would make it by far the toughest race, even if he survived that race. But people would ask me, well, what's different about McCormick? Or maybe is there something different about Casey? Well, Casey's a little different. He's got a wear and tear. Candidates get wear and tear over time. You get a long voting record. You could be tagged to unpopular things, especially in your party. And this year, as I said before, President Biden's numbers aren't over the top positive. And by the way, they're from the same neighborhood. I grew up right on the Scranton boy. I grew up right down, a mile or two from both Casey and Biden, where they grew up. Same hospital. This is my claim to fame. I saw John Fetterman today. I was reading a piece in the New York Times, an interview, and he was bragging that he was born in the same hospital as Taylor Swift. And I said, well, that's pretty cool. I always I was born in the same hospital as Biden and Casey. So, but I got Taylor Swift. It's just bigger. But Casey has a little bit of wear and tear, but McCormick fits this interesting role right now in Pennsylvania in politics. People that have been aligned with Donald Trump. Donald Trump's done well here. Won once, almost won again. People that have been aligned with Donald Trump in 2018 and 2022 get crushed. They get crushed. The Doug Mastrianos, the Lou Barlettas of this world, they lose, and they lose gigantically, right? You look at it. And sometimes that's who they're running up against too. Last time Mastriano came up against Governor Shapiro, very strong candidate. In many ways, our polls show even now his popularity is really historic for a state like Pennsylvania that's more purplish, but largely candidates that I would say are not the strongest. McCormick is a better candidate. He's got a good bio. He's a West Point guy. His background is in business, which traditionally, Wall Street guy, appeals to more moderate Republicans, maybe business-oriented Republicans that don't like some of the changing populist trends within the party. But he also has been able to escape being tagged by the ascending populist part of the Republican Party as a rhino. In other words, often if you're a little too moderate, you get tagged as a rhino, you draw the ire of Trump, you draw the ire of other Republicans and say, oh, you're not really Republican. McCormick's not getting that. He's not getting that. He maybe isn't, chummy deep with former President Trump, but they have a nice kind of working relationship right now. And that gets him in a sweet spot. He's also well funded. You can see the product of this, the number of ads. He's attacked Casey heavily. In our polls, I've seen Casey's favorability numbers drop significantly over that time. It takes its toll, right? The constant hitting over time, and it's become a pretty popular race. He's not without his own liabilities. You see these liabilities being exposed. Spends a lot of his life in Connecticut the last 20 years. That's always hard, right? It's not quite Mehmet Oz last time. Mehmet Oz, right? Dr. Oz was almost too easy to attack, right? His connections to Pennsylvania were as cursory as anything, and it came out pretty easy, right? You could see that he's not tight with Pennsylvania. He's been here. He might travel through the state, but he's not from Pennsylvania. McCormick grew up here, has a little background here, but indeed has spent most of his adult life, the last 20 years, living in Connecticut. That opens it up, and you're seeing those hits. And he's made some faux pas. If I was the Casey campaign, by the way, the ad I would keep running is where he calls Yuengling beer Yangling. I don't know if you saw that. That's kind of a giveaway right there. He's like, oh, I love Yuengling beer. It's not like Dr. Oz with the crudité thing but still not good. But he's a much better candidate, and that race is going to be tight. And you've seen the amount. I've been trying to think about which ads I've got the most of at my door, at least delivered to my house this year. It's true. I've been telling the joke all throughout my talks this fall. I was stacking up. You all get the mailers, right? And I'm a registered independent, so I think I get all the mailers because I'm a target. And they keep piling up. And I went out to California about a month ago to give a talk at USC, and my wife, I had them stacked by the door. I came back and I said, "Where are all my mailers? The stack that I had there." And she goes, "I don't know." I go, "No, the stack." She goes, "I don't know, maybe you put them someplace." I think she recycled them is what she did. She was getting annoyed with my collection of these things. But the mailers for Casey and McCormick, right? Especially McCormick, have been exceptionally spending enormous amounts there. So that's going to be a tight race also. But as you know, because of where you are and where you live, the choices continue on. You are in the 7th congressional district. You are in the 7th. Oh, hey, thanks, Rabbi. Oh, I thought it was like a dance floor. You don't want me dancing. The 7th district, right, where you live, this is right now occupied by Congresswoman Wild, is one of the more competitive districts in the country. And so, by the way, the Senate race in Pennsylvania really important because you know the deal. Senate is almost even balanced. It is even balanced between Democrats and Republicans. A couple seats, one way or the other, is going to determine. So this seat could most certainly play a role in who controls the Senate. Same with the House. Pennsylvania has about 5 House seats that are pretty competitive. And the House story is about the same. Republicans have a handful advantage in the U.S. House. He's out of 435. You switch things a little bit. So every race is important, including here in the 7th. The 7th race is important. Congresswoman Wild is going for a 4th term. This is her attempt to get a 4th term. She's, over the course of her races, and the district has changed, right? The original district that she has changed to the one she's in right now, but her races have got closer. The first race she won by like 10 points. Then down to the first time she ran against Lisa Scheller was 4. The district changed and became more Republican oriented in 2022. They got rid of the section up in the Stroudsburgs that was pretty Democratic, moved in Carbon County, which is, as anybody knows, Carbon County, a pretty conservative area. It made the district a little more challenging for her. She survived in 2022. In a really close race by about 2 points in that rematch with Lisa Scheller. That race, this is one as a political scientist. If I didn't know the specifics of it, and I just looked at where it was, and I looked at the candidates, and I looked at the money, that's the type of race that I say usually flips during a midterm election. Because the president's party usually loses seats, and those are the marginal seats that are lost. I think she's survived. She's a good candidate. She works hard. She raises money. I think she fits the district well. But that's also the first election after the Roe decision, the Dobbs decision. And it changed the voter demographic a little bit in 2022. I think on the margin, it probably helped carry her over the line in that race. We'll see. I think that issue is still relevant. It's a little different in a presidential ecosystem than a midterm ecosystem, and I could talk about that later. But she's once again in another, not surprisingly, a very challenging race. As you know, she's running against Representative Ryan McKenzie from Lehigh County. Representative McKenzie's been a state rep for multiple terms, maybe 12 years or so, in the state house from Lehigh County. So he's a bit of a known entity, but not totally known because he's not run within the district like Representative Wild or Congresswoman Wild. And that's important. You have to have that name recognition. He's spent some money, but he's getting outspent significantly in the race. It's a little challenging, I think, for him, even if there's those wins at the back a little bit for Republicans right now, to get his name really known within this environment where it's hard to get attention, right? Imagine trying to get, if you're running for office right now, somebody's attention with all the noise, all the heavy den right now. So I think it's a little challenging for him to make inroads. Our poll, we polled it a few weeks ago. We had Representative Wild up 51 to 45 in that race over McKenzie, very close race. Her 51 number didn't surprise me. That's about where she's been most races, right around that number. His was 45, but he had a lot fewer people that had an opinion of him yet. About 20% didn't make up their mind. That's where that race is being fought, as he's trying to get that percent that are making up their mind about him. Can it move? Can it move the dial? So if she hits 51, she wins, right? If she holds that polling number, but that's close, right? In a race. So I expect that race to be close, probably similar to what we saw a couple of years ago. And when it's close, you of course expect either outcome. A really interesting race in lots of ways, which leads me, Rabbi, this might be the good time to take a few seconds to actually put the poll into place, the Goldberg poll, which is world-renowned and scientifically accurate and predictive. Absolutely. If we went back over time and checked the results, we would have predicted every election outcome to a tenth with this very representative audience that we have. So here's what we're going to do. Here's the poll. We're going to ask for everybody's have a piece of paper, first of all.
So I put paper out on the table with enough, but as people came in, so if you don't have a piece of paper, raise your hand. If you need a writing implement, we have a few pencils we can bring around the chair.
Excellent. Oh, thank you. We have a crack team of election. Be nice to your election administrators too. That's what we should.
We're also the devil is the ritual.
And the ritual committee. I love it. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Once I feel like I'm giving a test right now, but it's very important that we keep the tradition alive. Once we get them all out, I'll make my pitch. Then we'll collect them, and then people will have time. I don't know if our administration team could get the numbers done by the time I'm wrapping up my talk. Oh, sure. As we're handing it out.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And you have, of course, the ultimate privilege.
Eye color.
Oh, is this the brown? Oh, you know what? It got a little white right there. I'm acknowledging. So I'm channeling right now. That's
Was how significant are these particular vice president choices?
oh yeah. It's a great question. Do vice presidents matter? Right? Do vice presidents matter? With these two, yeah. And it's okay. I'll take it from the big. What a beautiful question. From a big perspective, right? From a big perspective, vice presidents have limited impact on campaigns historically. All the evidence points that is, while we love to talk about them, we certainly make a big deal when they're chosen. We go deep into their stories and we see how they perform. The evidence traditionally says pretty limited effects. So all the empirical analysis over time say maybe move a point here or there. The talk, the textbook example was LBJ in 1960 with Kennedy. I'm sure Gordon would give us the whole story of that, but that helped to win Texas, right? The idea that LBJ pushed it over. It's hard to find other examples of that since, right? That clearly it had an effect. Senator Vance and Governor Walz right now. If you say, well, are they impacting the results? We have polling about their favorability. We have polling about, do we think they'd be a good president? Some of this, not gigantic differences between them. Again, they're, in terms of performance. I'll come back to my point about it being so close, right? So all the little things would matter. So the question I get the most is, what if Harris had picked Governor Shapiro instead of Governor Walz, right? Would that have made a difference in Pennsylvania? Pennsylvania is really close, right? Governor Shapiro, in our last poll, was 55% approval. He's been at 60% in our earlier polls. He's very popular, and like negatives only in the 20s right now. Could that have helped in Pennsylvania? I certainly think all things being considered, yes, right? Yes, it's probably close. You have a popular, he knows Pennsylvania. He's working hard, by the way, right now for the Harris campaign, He's putting lots of time and effort in. But as the vice presidential candidate, would it have mattered? It's one of those fascinating cases that's hard to say for sure. I do know if say Pennsylvania is lost by a very little amount, and that becomes pivotal in terms of the outcome of this race, that will be one of the big thing is revisited over and over and over again. It's destined to be. The last thing I'll say about that is when Governor Shapiro was being considered this summer, I did like 30 big interviews that never got aired because it was one of those that you do beforehand. So when you meet with reporters from all around, they say, hey, we're doing a pre-story and we'd love your opinions on if Governor Shapiro is the candidate, right? And so I get along, we talk forever, and they say, oh yeah, if he doesn't get picked, we'll kill the story. So I was spending weeks talking about Governor Shapiro. And I said, in almost every one of those interviews, I understand why he would be considered, every reason in the world to consider him. I didn't think he wanted the job. I didn't, and I've met Governor Shapiro a couple of times. I have no insider information about him. I just thought I followed his career since he's, in Montgomery County, very methodical when he picks to run, so managed, so disciplined, kind of sets himself up on his path and chooses wisely as part of his whole approach. I said, would he turn himself over to being a vice presidential candidate where you really lose control and you're indebted to the top of the ticket? And it didn't make sense to me to do that. And I don't know to this day if that kind of came across and we pick our candidates, presidents pick their candidates to kind of match and have a feel with. And I think Governor Walz has a good kind of working relationship with Vice President Harris. I could see why she would do that. And the other thing I thought about, I think Governor Shapiro certainly still wants to be president of the United States. And is his path easier in some ways no matter what, right? So I'll throw it out this way. Say she had won, or say she wins, Vice President Harris, and he was vice president. Well, you will eventually get a chance to run, but again, it's depending on the candidates. Remember the cycles we talked about? Let's say she won twice. And then after 8 years, probably not a best time for a vice president to step in, right? So looking ahead, and this is all just a long answer for this question. If Vice President Harris loses, right, and if she did lose if she lost Pennsylvania, no matter what, he's going to be elevated to the elite of the elite coming out. And I think if that's his ultimate goal, and only Governor Shapiro could tell you if that's his ultimate goal, and he might not tell you, I think it's just strategically different. So it's a wonderful question, and I will come back to that. Well, I could finish. Well, could we do the poll first? Yeah. I want to do the poll. I don't want to blow up. I want to make sure the results come in on time. We don't want to be waiting here till 3 a.m. To get. And there is pre-canvassing.
Hand counted or machine counted, and are they Dominion?
We have the team in. They are allowed to pre-canvass. They could open the ballots early and start counting before the thing is over. Okay, so we're going to do this. You're going to, on your piece of paper, we're going to do 3 races, and then we're going to do a top issue. Gordon always liked the top issue. So we're going to have 4 things. So the first one you're going to vote on, and I guess I'll just read them, right? Is this good, Aaron? Or
Yeah, I'm just here to pick it up.
Oh, all right. We got our team look scattered all around. This is great. Okay, so the first one you're going to cast a vote for is the presidential race. It's the top, just like the real ballot that you'll see. And you could vote for former President Trump. You could vote for Vice President Harris. If you have a third-party candidate you're going to vote for, you could either say who it is or just other. Or you could say you're not sure. So there's 4 options. I'll say that again. Harris, Trump, third party, other, and you can list the person, or you're not sure. Is that clear? That's your choices. All right. Those are the big choices right there. Give you a second to get that. So the pencils, everybody got their pencils? All right, we're gonna go to our second, and this is gonna be the US Senate race in Pennsylvania. We're gonna follow the same list. We'll go with Senator Casey, the Democrat, Dave McCormick, the Republican. The other, you could the same one if you had a third party candidate or other, you can list that, or if you're not sure. So Casey, McCormick, other, third party, not sure. That makes sense? All right, I'm administering here. Under the watchful eye as to. All right, we'll go to the House race. This is the Pennsylvania 7th. This is our local district. This is the Democrat incumbent, Congresswoman Susan Wild, against Representative McKenzie, Ryan McKenzie. You could just last names will do for this. And if there is, I don't know, is there a third party? I should check that. I don't know. But you could, if you say you'd like to vote for. There's one, nobody's, there was not on the ballot. So we'll just skip that and just say not sure. Just not sure for that one. So Wild, McKenzie, not sure. And the final question, I'm going to frame it this way. And I think Gordon would like it in this format. What is the most important issue to you as you cast your presidential vote? So I'm going to say this again. What is the most important issue to you as you cast your presidential vote? So this is as you're making your decision, what is the most important issue? And it could be broad issues. It could be something related to candidates. But what is the most important thing to you as you make your vote? Is that clear enough? I know it's a little challenging, putting you on the spot there to do, but the issue that you think, okay, this matters, and it could be kind of broad or it could be narrow. We'll calculate them. Our team will calculate. Okay, I think that's it. You don't have to sign your ballot.
Secret ballot.
Secret ballot. Secret. Oh, here we go. Oh, we've got the official. Oh, we've got a collection mechanism. Yeah, one ballot. Do I have to say it? One ballot per person? No one's going to stop.
This should be me, Karen, my friend.
That
Don't
was-
worry, this is not an official
Could you
vote.
Imagine a scandal, a ballot stuffing scandal.
Question about the Jewish vote.
Oh, yeah.
And it depends on the Jewish community and the makeup of that.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's Rabbi was talking about, the
Crazy commercials of Jews.
Well, we saw, oh my gosh, my students the other day we could talk about the commercial, my class,
And if they lose, then it blames the Jews.
well, that's the interest.
If you're voting, we have a sample size of 47. If
Wait.
you're not, it's a sample size of 46.
I am not, we'll wait for a second, folks. I promise to answer lots of questions. I want to make sure that everybody gets their ballots in. And then I'm just going to say a couple of things and we're going to turn right over to questions. But I know we got great questions.
You borrow your pencil, list it up so that we can pull out.
Oh, yeah, we have to collect, the pencils. These belong to the congregation. Don't take the pencils.
Otherwise, the Jews will vote.
The Jews go up. I don't want to be responsible for that. Everybody got their pencils and their votes in? All right, thank you to our team. They're gonna spend a little time calculating and we will announce for Gordon's tradition at the end. All right, I want to say a couple things before we get to questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to ask it now or do you want to hear the end? You get to decide. You have special privilege. All right, I'm just gonna say a couple more things and then I'm gonna go, well, absolutely, I'll answer every question that you have if I can. And you're willing to stay. The last thing I want to talk about is don't forget what makes it so special for you right now. The presidential race we've talked about, competitive, Senate race, competitive, House race, all of those just in the polling are like points apart. But there's lots of other races that are going to be decided in the state. There's the state row houses, the Senate, the Attorney General, the auditor general, the treasurer races, often important in terms of state politics. Your state legislative races, your state legislative races. I don't know how much you follow Harrisburg politics, but our state house. And here's a first question, bonus points for you. How many seats are there in the Pennsylvania House? Barry, you get first choice. 203. That's good. You get bonus. Give him an extra, whatever we got over there. Yeah, an extra. No, yeah, no extra votes for Barry. For Barry, but 203, which is interesting by itself. That's a story we could tell you why we have 203. But here's 203 right now. Democrats hold 102. Republicans hold 101. One seat difference. One seat difference to control our state house. The Senate, the Republicans have a 3-seat advantage. They hold 27 to 23. There's only 50 in our house there, or 20, yeah, 24 in terms of seats. At 3 seats would even it up right now. 3 seats, actually it was 22, so yeah, 28. So if Democrats could swing 3 seats, they could even it up at 25-25. And if you talk to Democratic strategists, they think that could be doable after redistricting last time. This will be the first time we came through there. But here's what I want to make the case. Pennsylvania is only one of 2. Alaska has a really funky system, but they claim also to have divided state government in terms of the legislature, with one house being Democrat and one house being Republican. But other than Alaska, we're the only other one in that position. And so I want to make the case how exceptional this is, right? They literally, the control of the House could be decided by a seat here or there. And that's why you might be living in one of the districts in Pennsylvania right now, in the Lehigh Valley, that's getting enormous amounts of attention. I'll give my example. I live in the 137th. This is Representative Emmerich's district. It's just right up the road here. I live in Nazareth. This is Representative Emmerich, a multi-term Republican incumbent, is running for re-election, and he's running against Anna Thomas, a young Democrat, who challenged him last time. Anna Thomas, you've probably seen the ads, even if you don't listen, live in the district. She barely lost a couple hundred votes last time. In 2022, the district, this is where redistricting matters. That district got redistricted and became a little more Democratic than it used to be, opening the door, making it harder for Emmerich, just like for Susan Wild, a little harder for her to hold her seat. And that seat, that race is, the price tag is in the millions of dollars for one, 203 state house. And that's a single one, right? I cannot tell you, the last day I remember when mail came, when I didn't see an Emmerich, again, I'm an independent, an Emmerich or Thomas ad. And you look on TV, there was a time for most of us, you would never see a state house race get on TV. Now there's more outlets now. You could do online things compared to the past, and cable there's more options there, right, that you could do. But it's costly. It's really costly. Anybody that's ever run an ad. And what makes that so kind of challenging is they're paying all that right now in an environment where everybody else is trying to get ads. So I don't know if anybody owns a TV station or a radio station. Kudos to you, because sure, you could name your price. Everybody's trying to get every little piece, right? And they're looking for every little online space to go to. So from the top to our very localized versions, you have great competition. And that is, again, a blessing. You got choice. Choice is great. I love to be kind of coveted and courted, right? You get to be courted, and that's, you should be. That competition's good. They can't ignore you. One party can't ignore you. So that's good, a good thing. It's also kind of tiring, right? It wears a little bit on you to constantly be courted. And for long periods of time, campaigns are very long. They've become longer, right? It seems like this one's been going forever. Everybody could feel that way. And that causes some wear and tear on you. And I'll stop with this and then answer questions. We do every year at Muhlenberg for the last 14 years, maybe 13. And I guess that's not important, but we do a statewide public health poll every spring where we ask Pennsylvanians a whole variety of issues of health. It could be based on a health issue, health insurance or access, or care, or obviously during the pandemic, infectious diseases or mental health issues, things that we asked. Last year, the spring, we did a whole thing on what the stressors are in Pennsylvanians' lives. So we asked a question, hey, is this issue or factor a major stress, moderate stress, or a little stress or no stress in your life? And we go with the big things. What causes people stress? Money, jobs, personal relationships, right? Things that you think where your stress might emanate from. We added one in, politics and current events. And we just put that in and we randomize it. We do all the things we do method-wise to make sure it's right. And of all the things that people reported, the one that got the largest score of major stress was politics. The largest one, that people, highest percentage. And when you think about what we've just described, how you're courted, how tight things are, how deeply we feel. I didn't even get in deep about how emotional people are right now about this race, the races that we're looking at. It's deep and it's a part of us, and we're living together. We're living in this, right? I live on Main Street in Nazareth, and I walk down Main Street in Nazareth, Trump sign, Harris sign, Trump sign, 2 Harris signs, right? My district, my ward in Nazareth in 2020, over 1,000 people voted. 3 vote difference between Biden and Trump. I'm in like the heart of the heart, right? And it's hard, right? I always say, I'm an analyst. I try to give you the picture. I have my own feelings. I vote, right? I make choices. And sometimes when, you feel that and you see people putting out certain signs, either way, you got to live with that, especially when you're emotional, right? And right now we are in that mix. And so that's it. So I will, at this point, I know I've seen questions everywhere popping up. I will answer, and we'll get reports later. The folks in the back never get called first. So I'm going all the way to the back. Yes, you.
So, this is the synagogue you're at, so I'm sure you're expecting questions. With the situation going on right now in Israel and Gaza, highly volatile, and I know that impacts perceptions of the Democratic Party in particular. And I was wondering, I'm hoping if that situation gets resolved before the election, do you think that would have any impact on the outcome?
It's an incredibly important question, especially with our audience and where I'm standing today, of course, in a synagogue with an audience of Jewish Americans. The issue, and we see evidence of this, right, when we're in polling, is the question we could ask, is the issue of what's happening in Israel and Gaza and the broader Middle East, is that more salient, more important to Jewish voters? And the answer is yes. Marginally, right? By the way, if we ask Jewish voters, we and break it out, what's the most important issue? You still find it aligns more with everybody else. Economic issues, healthcare, a whole variety of issues, right? So it's not that it automatically rises, but when you put it in order, and so you say, well, okay, how is that going to affect the vote? You also probably know that, and we talked about, Rabbi, you kind of mentioned this before. Of course, the Jewish vote is not monolithic. No vote is, but you could look within the Jewish voters in places like Pennsylvania and beyond. You say, well, what's the traditional pattern? And Jewish voters tend to vote more likely Democratic. And that vacillates a little bit from election to election, but it's somewhere in that 2/3, 60%, mid 60%, right, race, which is crucial to Democrats in close races. About 400,000 Jewish voters in Pennsylvania. And if they break usually Democratic, maybe 60%, that's a key part of the Democratic coalition in the state, as are Black voters, which vote usually high 85, 90%, younger voters, overwhelmingly, historically, more Democratic. But it comes back to the crucial question right now. Where is that vote in this particular election? And as you said, well, would it be affected by changing events in the next 10 days?
about some of the other people who are normal Democratic constituents, Black people, Muslims, other people who feel that they are disenfranchised minorities who are
Yes.
identifying with the government. And so I'm just wondering if this thing gets resolved, does that change?
It's a good question, and I can't tell you for certain. I can tell you it is caused some of the strain within the Democratic coalition that you described, right? Younger voters, if we look at right now, are not as likely to be leaning Democrat as they were in 2020. Is all of that due to the situation in Gaza? Probably not, but could that be a contributing factor? And there's some evidence that says it is. More young progressive voters in particular, that's tended to be the spot where it is. And the answer is, I can't tell you for sure. Let's say there was some kind of peace agreement or ceasefire. Would it have some mitigating offense of impact on some of those voters? I'm just not sure. But I do know it's crucial, right? I do know it's crucial. This has been a challenge for the Democratic coalition. I'll tell you this. I did some polling this summer for a client that I was working with who was interested in the Democratic vote, Jewish Democratic voters in Pennsylvania. And this was during the summer, so it's old data to see what kind of effect it was having on. This is only Jews that are registered Democrats and vote Democrat. It didn't have a big effect on moving that group. Now, these were people that not, most of the evidence we have, but that was earlier this summer. Those other groups, there's been some more evidence. So it's a great question. I wish I had a more granular answer, but I don't. All right, I'm just going to move around. I'm going to come back to you, but I want to make sure I'm covering the. Do we want results now?
Yeah.
I think we're going to hold. We got to build up some suspense here. This is nothing. We can't dive into that. But are they interesting results?
Sure. So, and I will say that, I'm honored to be here to do this role that Gordon did for so many years, in his memory. As Gordon said, in this sample size, no, it's not that.
All right, we'll channel that. But I'm gonna go over here. You were patient. You had a question before.
So I'm transgender and,
Here.
Oh,
so, okay.
you want to hear?
There's plenty of court.
Oh, court. There you go. They couldn't hear you in the back. So.
So I'm transgender, specifically trans femme, and you would think with it being such a niche issue, like trans people are such a small minority of the population, they have next to no power and almost no rights. Why is the Republican Party, and broadly speaking, especially the Trump campaign, spending tens of millions of dollars more than on the economy on demonizing trans people? And what I would think is, I like to compare Donald Trump to a character called Marie Le Pen. The only thing is, I think Marie Le Pen is a lot smarter because her father was anti-Semitic. Her father, very, Le Pen is bigoted, but very anti-LGBT. And then you have Le Pen trying to modernize National Front and now National Rally. And you don't see that in the Republican Party, which you would think is very organized, and it's like it has its appeal to base voters, but it's like Trump is a cult of personality, so he knows he's going to get his votes. He literally said in 2016 he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and he would still vote for him, and I absolutely believe that. So he doesn't need to run messages to appeal to his base. They're going to vote for him regardless. Why doesn't he at least pretend to moderate and then go crazy once he gets elected?
It's a beautiful. Thank you so much. First of all, you articulate that very well. And as you note, and anybody that's watching the ads, this cycle has seen a very high focus on the trans population, right? And trans individuals. The question, you frame it so nicely. Why? It's first of all, a small portion of the electorate. It's something that you wouldn't think would rise. When we ask in polls, what's your biggest issue? We'll never see that, as part of it.
and even when we have a small, we ask in a kind of identity questions or, you know, how do you identify? And we do have a trans option, people transitioning. And even among that group, they'll even say other issues, right? You know, to do, it's a very small sample. So the question is why? And as you said, well, is that just to ramp up the base? It's not, at least from my evaluation. That's part of it, right? And to do this, but look at the ads. If you look at some of the trans ads, often they're trans issue ads, I'll say. Often it'll be Vice President Harris in her own words, right? You know, talking on a show to a host about surgery for prisoners, right? And that kind of, so it's to make it look just kind of fringe, not to the base, but kind of, well, she's interested, you know, the line is she's interested in they, them, I'm interested in you, right? It sets it up nicely for that argument. The other is, and this goes back to the question about kind of voters of color, Black voters, and particularly Black men. If you watch the ads the last few weeks, the ads that are focusing on trans issues, it's Black radio host, or at least they're pretending to be Black radio host, two Black younger men talking about that issue and saying she wants to pay our money, our tax money for these types of operations. I don't want to pay for that. And it's targeted, at least in my mind, and this is just my analysis, it's targeted at trying, this is a core group within the Democratic coalition, and split the base, yeah, or at least take the margin. So here's an interesting story. In 2020, Trump actually, out of Philadelphia, you know, Biden won Philadelphia overwhelmingly, but they yield. It's the difference between what the two candidates got was actually 4,000 votes less than it was when Hillary went up against Trump 4 years earlier. He made marginal, you know, he did a little bit better. Biden did better too among the, you know, more people turned out, but on the yield, what came out, he got less. Where Biden kicked butt was in the Philly suburbs. He got 100,000 more votes out of Bucks, Delaware, Chester, Montgomery County, right? And that was, if you ask me, the biggest difference was there. It might be this year too, if you look at it. But so he thinks this year, the polling shows there's a softness for Harris, especially among Black men, and they're looking for wedge issues. And this is the issue. That's my guess. That's look at the ads if you see the ads come up.
A walking wedge issue.
I love it. I don't know if you heard, but I'm a walking wedge issue. You know, it's sadly, yeah. All right, we're gonna let's see. I want to make sure I'm working the room. We're going way to the back for my staff.
As a moderate, okay, I'm gonna, you know, come out in 2016, you know, I was a moderate Republican, I voted for Trump. With the stark differences, I think there's really stark differences between the candidates that I don't think we've seen in such a way before. Like, if you go back to McCain, Obama, their policies, but they're friendly, and it's not the vitriol that we've seen. How is it that we have so many, like, and not just Pennsylvania, but across, that so many people are undecided this late in the game? That keeps being a core thing. The Daily Show keeps hitting, Saturday Night Live keeps hitting. All of these things, like when you poll and people say they're undecided, are they giving a reason, or is there anything? Because it's not like it's like, well, it's like, okay, these are two political candidates who are almost identical. It's like we're not looking at two old white men.
It's a key question, and the answer is there's not that many. There aren't that many undecideds. It's as you said, kind of the idea. It's almost a joke. Who could be undecided, right? Right now, and certainly there are folks that maybe not are 100% sure. They haven't voted that much. They're by the way, the people that are often undecided are what we consider lower engagement voters, people that don't vote all that often, that are either thinking about coming in or not coming in. But the share, as a pollster, I could tell you, we're going to do our poll this week. If we get 2% that say they're undecided, I'd be surprised. And which is historically low, right? It's historically low. It's just that it's so close and everything on the margin matters, that little difference, right? If you could just nudge a few folks in or out,
and this is another story about elections, right? Can you push people maybe sometimes maybe to say, I don't want to vote? That could be impactful. So you're right. It's like, who could be undecided? Not that many people, but they're pivotal in the race. So it's really well stated.
You want
Good.
to do like 2 or 3
Oh, yeah.
questions in a row, and then we'll wrap it up with the,
Perfect.
otherwise,
We'll be here too.
Yeah,
And I'll hang around after
until
to
11,
talk. I gotta give the rabbi, it's his house.
So my question is about when we'll know, when do you think we'll know who won? If it's this close. And every vote is gonna maybe, 1,000 votes makes a difference one way or the other, depending on certain races. And we don't know right away on election night. What do you see unfolding? And you believe that the democratic process will hold up?
Yeah, so the rabbi is asking, right, when will we know the results? And what impact would it have if we don't know them that quick and as those come in, given that it's likely to be close, right? And I expect it to be close. Okay, here's where just a little bit, most of you probably know this, you're such an informed audience. The rules in Pennsylvania about counting ballots and how we do it. About a third of Pennsylvanians are going to vote via mail ballot. Many of you may have voted already in the state by this option, which is, of course, a legal option since Act 77 was passed in 2019, bipartisan, by the way, in Harrisburg. And so those ballots, those that have sent those in, my 2 children who are living out of state right now sent theirs in. I was very proud of them, by the way. Even this is like a little side, my one very not good student, young son who's out in Utah, he sent me this saying, look, I got my ballot. It was like, and I didn't even ask him to do it. He's like a professor dad's sad student, like, how did I raise him? But he did it. So getting those ballots in, which I like to see, but that's an aside. Those ballots, anybody that did it, including my son, you cannot even take them out of the packaging until 7 a.m. on election day. That is state law. We have a rule that says you can't pre-canvass, this word you might have heard probably never before, but now you do. Pre-canvassing means you can't do anything. You can't take them out. All you could do is log them in. So you could see, as you should, did your ballot get received? You can make sure you have it, those things. So those are set through the county, but they cannot open it. And if you remember, those that have sealed it, you have to take them out. The process is pretty boring administrative wise. You have to take them out. You got to unfold, like basically fold them to get them ready to process. So you have to fold them back and forth to level them off, to stack them up. And that takes time. It takes time, but by law, you cannot do that until election day. That will slow the process down. In 2020, it really slowed the process down because counties had never experienced this before. Absentee ballots, which you could get, were like a sliver of the electorate. Hardly anybody, unless you were out of the country or you were in the military, used it. And all of a sudden, counties had to deal with a whole bunch of them last time. The millions of them, right? A third of the votes. And it took a long time. And it's not that they're representative of all the other votes because people utilize them differently. And it's based on partisan affiliation. Democrats are much more likely to use mail ballots than Republicans. And that's also not a secret. Messaging from the parties had been dramatically different on this, especially in 2020, with Democrats encouraging Democratic voters to vote that way, saying it's a safe way to do it, and messaging from Republicans, including at that time President Trump, and then now since former President Trump, denouncing the method as fraudulent and having all kinds of problems. And so Republicans don't vote as much by that mean. That means day of ballots that will be counted, more Republicans vote on election day. They will be counted first, and the original numbers reported will look more Republican. As the counties start to finally get to those mail ballots, which they'll be better at this time, and they'll be quicker, they'll start adding those in. But it's going to shift. And this is not, this is the one thing I've told everybody, this is not a something's going on type of thing. This is math. This is math. You count those mail ballots, Democrats, you could see who votes more. That's not a secret, even beforehand. Where are the ballots coming in, Democrat or Republican? And you could do the math and see how it's going to shift. But that's not going to be always reported or in social media or in other places when those results change. It will likely mirror what happened last time. What's going on? Why are we were ahead, now we're losing, or now it's getting closer. I could tell you why it's getting closer, because we're counting ballots from a method that is used differently. That doesn't mean it won't happen in the messaging. If it is really close, and let's just say there is a flip, of course, it's going to be portrayed in one way, that it's somehow fraudulent. Does that undermine results or confidence? Yeah, we have my polls, other polls will show you, we have a trust deficit in now that never existed before in electoral systems. And I think it's one of the things, this is solvable. Let them pre-canvass. Let them, this should be a bipartisan. In fact, state county officials, Republican and Democrat alike, will tell you, just let us pre-canvass these things. Let's get them going. The argument, well, what if they got released? What if there was some leak about results? You don't have to even get the results. Just get them ready, right? Just stack them up and get them. This is kind of administrative, boring stuff. So I think it is almost, I don't want to be too hyperbolic. I think it's an absolute horrible use of or holding hostage an election process for means that I think aren't necessary, the motives that aren't necessarily pure about the democracy, to hold those things up. That's my best answer, Rabbi. Okay.
So when will we know the results?
I guess I buried the lead. We'll probably know them quicker than we did last time. There is a deal. The counties are getting state money if they agree to just keep counting until they're done counting this time. And they're better at it. They're better equipped. I would imagine we'll probably have results the next day. But again, depending how close it is. And the one thing I can guarantee you, if it's that close and we get it next day, there's going to be inevitable lawsuits
Dewey wins.
Dewey, yeah, well, yeah, Dewey the son. Yeah, Steve Garnack is very, very good. I'm going to go, gentleman in the back.
You in your classroom talk to your students about having election day as a national holiday.
It's a wonderful.
Everything closes and everybody has to vote.
Yeah, it is a wonderful question. Election day, some countries, as you know, do that. They have the day off as a day to participate as citizens. We don't. And you might think, okay, well, and here's it gets complex, right? Now we let people vote early, and you might say, well, that kind of takes the pressure off election day. And I'd say that's at least a little legitimate compared to the past, where you can guarantee that people have different access to voting on election day. I am absolutely blessed. I have my schedules flexible. I could take off between classes. I have time in the afternoon. I can go vote. I vote in Nazareth. I vote in Borough Hall. The longest line I've ever had is like 15 minutes. There are other places you go on election day, you could wait 2 hours, 4 hours, other states, 8 hours, right? That you could see. That's unequal. And therefore you say, well, how could you get that? Well, first of all, people that work 12-hour days, or my dad's a mechanic, he was out at 6 in the morning and he came back at 5. He voted on the way back. But it wasn't as equal as the access I would have, right? As somebody. So the big question, could it be a national holiday? Sure, it could. Just like pre-canvassing, the question would be, who wants to support it? Why would they support it? It'll all be looked through a partisan lens. But my students, I can't. So I'll give you this. Muhlenberg has classes on election day. I told my class, we don't have class on election day. Go work on the campaign. They could work for me. We do exit polling. We do a whole bunch of stuff you'll have lots of activities, but it's a great question. Great question. I think, where is Aaron? How many more before? And I'll stick around to ask folks too.
Both at the same time.
And then answer them. And then I promise I will stay around and answer questions for folks that don't get a chance. All right. Well, I'll listen to both of them and then I'll answer them. So you first. Sure. Oh, yes, that's gonna be good. So I'll talk about that. Platform issues versus personality, which is a percentages. Yeah. This sounds horrible for a pollster to not want to give percentages, but it's how you frame the question, right? We say, hey, is it an issue that you're voting versus a character issue?
How many vote personality versus on the platform?
I wish I could tell you. Yeah, it's a great question, but it's again, hard to measure. That is good. Yes.
I don't think the answer to this tonight. You talked earlier about the president who's in power losing. When going back to 1960, except for the one time. When I thought of that, every single one of those, the president in power was in for 2 terms.
Yeah, that was.
So, is there any information about that? This is different. We have a president who's only in 1 term, and complicating that, we have a president running against him who is unique to others. I can say anything else about it compared to others.
No, it's a great question. As you said, they're usually 2 terms because usually presidents do get reelected.
You said they get tired, but the public wants to change.
Well, it has it's really good, but you think, okay, let's go back and look at the periods since 1960, right? Where we might have had that with 1-term presidents. And so I'm going to give Johnson, I'm going to talk about Johnson in 68, right? He was elected in 64 overwhelmingly after the Kennedy assassination. So he was vice president, but only reelected once. And then he stepped aside, right? And so in 68, it's one of those, it's kind of a 1-term presidency, but if you took Kennedy in, right? So the term, but clearly there was kind of dissatisfaction with the direction. That's why he stepped aside like Biden did this time. But then we enter an interesting period with when Nixon steps aside and Ford is, so he's only been in for a few years and he loses, right? And then 4 years later, Carter loses. So it was kind of this quick, turbulent period. And as a political scientist, we were studying that period as, hey, is this the end of the ability of presidents to really create, longer terms? Are we in this place where we're constantly aching for something different? And after that, as you said, the next one we saw was George H.W. Bush in 1992. So he loses, right? He loses that election. Largely as he's an incumbent to do it, but that's so the thought was, other than Reagan and the period in between, you had this kind of failed presidencies, George H.W. Bush, Carter, Ford, and you're thinking, what's going on with America? Are we can't be satisfied? And then all of a sudden, Clinton, Bush, Obama, right? And we kind of, okay, we reverted to those periods. Now the big question, no matter what we'll see with this one, are we've entered this new period of hard to govern, ungovernable is the word I see listed. Trump, couldn't govern and he gets kicked out. Biden couldn't, at least in the opinion of the electorate, go and had to move power at that point. I don't know. Well, if that happens, if Trump wins this time, certainly that's going to be the conclusion that a lot of folks draw. I know a question, Aaron, or should we take one more?
What extent does Harris as vice president Biden seem almost as an incumbent and then falling prey to the same statistics you gave us for the incumbent are usually much better?
Well, you can see every effort in the world to make that pitch to the voters, right? If you look at the tenor of the Trump Vance ads, it's the most common kind of refrain that you want more of Biden, that she's part of the administration. She is part of the administration, that you could try to link them together in the public mind as close. I think it's hard for her to escape that, even if people are giving her some distance to say that she's has her own, as she said, I won't be a continuation of the Biden administration, I'll be my own. She is in the shadow in some ways, and this is why I use the example, the kind of historically, president's approval, even if it's after 2 terms, their approval numbers are pretty predictive of what happens to their party. The only one that didn't, right, was Bush in '88, and Reagan's numbers were different. So she's going to be attached. Just how deep it is, the question that you said. Trump complicates that, right? Because he complicates a lot of things. He's a disruptor, right? And he's not a complete outsider too. So you could appeal to kind of his presidency, which makes it really hard to say. Folks, thank you so much. We're going to now turn it over. Thank you. Well, you didn't come to see me. You came to get the results of of Gordon's poll. So I'm gonna turn this over to the Federation.
We do not endorse any of the results of this poll, and the Federation is a non-for-profit organization, does not support any of the candidates, only certain issues. And making it clear for the recording as well. And this is Gordon's poll, and so we're doing his honor. Very surprising results. We'll go into, why don't we start first with the House, and then we work to the Senate and then the President. Maybe first issues. What was the number one issue that will give away maybe the presidential? The number one issue was that we sort of combined, because a lot of people answered both at the same time, was with 16 votes, defeat Trump / save democracy. Defeat Trump / save democracy was the number one issue. Saving democracy / defeating Trump, that was with 16 votes. Reproductive rights was number 2, that was 8 votes. Number 3 was Israel with 7 votes. And then he goes, all of the rest are 1 or 2 votes. So one is economy, climate change, immigration, integrity, and foreign policy. For the House, overwhelming support for one of the candidates. So it was 36 votes for Representative Wild, 6 votes for Ryan McKenzie, and 1 person was out of district, so decided not to vote for it. In the Senate, Bob Casey received 34 votes, and McCormick received 9 votes. And the presidential was a little different. Unsure, we had 3 votes. Other had 2 votes. Trump had 4 votes, and Harris had 34 votes. So those were the results. Again, we do not endorse any of the results. They will be published on the Morning Call consult on Friday. That's what he was talking about.
I'm tweeting them out right now.
Yes, and in this particular sense, we wanted to thank first, we wanted to thank Chris for such a wonderful and informative presentation. Rabbi Singer for being such a modest host and continuing to honor the memory of Gordon in this particular lecture. And our friends at KI who decided to join us tonight, and we're certainly will be thrilled to co-sponsor also the event after the election and broadcasting it to the community. And again, thank you again for doing one event for the community and to honor Gordon's memory. And the most important thing you can take out for tonight is that you have to go vote. You cannot complain unless you vote. So please go vote. Whatever your heart tells you, and thank you everybody for coming, and
Federation.
Thank you for doing the legwork. Yeah, that's it. Administrators.